Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Present.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Ms. Gresham?
Present.
Ms. Hurst?
Present.
Attorney Murphy? Here. Mr. Gonzalez?
Here.
And Mayor Sarno.
President, can we all please rise for a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance?
These chairs out. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you very much. And before we go any further, we do have our new student representative, Ava Moore, who was a senior at Putnam Vocational Technical Academy. And her trade, she's going for criminal justice and wants to come work for our Springfield Police Department as a detective. We love that. And she is the president of a senior class, Madam President. And she's also very involved with the Centro Cristiano Nation of Jesus Church, that's on Sumner Avenue there, youth ministry, the media ministry, and actively helps out the children's ministry. So we are very happy. I know Detective Greg Kane is here for us tonight too, so he's happy to hear that you want to come on the Springfield Police Force and be a detective. And Ava will have her segment later on in the meeting, and I understand you have a 13-page dissertation. Thank you, Ava. It's great to have you on board. Okay, we'll now move to the agenda, approval of the minutes for the August 29th, 2024 school committee meeting. Any questions or comments?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Motion by Mr. Collins, or second, please.
Second.
Second by Ms. Gresham. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy? Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
And Mayor Sarno.
Yes, support the official vote, this matter passed. Thank you very much. A is to approve policy AC. This is the second vote. Madam Superintendent, Dr. Denault, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. File AC is a non-discrimination policy including harassment and retaliation. Attorney Phelps was instrumental in ensuring that the language aligns legally to everything that we have to adhere to. Katie O'Sullivan from our HR department is here to speak on that.
Ms. O'Sullivan. And just for the viewing audience, too, a lot of times you'll see things get voted through with short discussion. A lot of the hard work, hours and hours of hard work, is done in subcommittee meetings, and I give credit to the chairs and the subcommittee members, too. Ms. O'Sullivan, please.
Yes, we're here tonight to vote on the non-discrimination policy, including harassment and retaliation. This was amended due to the Title IX 2024 regulations that went into effect on August 1st, 2024.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion on the floor?
So move.
Motion by Ms. Naylor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Collins. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Sarno.
Yes, more than sufficient vote, this matter passes. Thank you very much. B is to approve the policy on ACA. This is the second vote. Madam Superintendent, Dr. Denault, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, file ACA, non-discrimination on the basis of sex. The language had to be updated in order to be aligned to federal regulations. Again, Katie O'Sullivan will share additional information.
Thank you.
Yes, this is to amend the non-discrimination on the basis of sex and align it to the Title IX regulations that now have sex-based harassment that is used rather than just sexual harassment.
Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, is a motion on the floor.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Collins, or second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Naylor. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Sarno.
Yes, more than sufficient vote, this matter passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan.
Thank you.
C is to approve, to adopt a policy require one vote for policy change or amendment and two votes at two separate school committee meetings for any new school committee policy. Madam Superintendent, Dr. Denault, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And school committee members will be able to speak at length on item C, as it has been reviewed in subcommittee. So I yield the floor to the school committee members.
Mayor, yeah, we asked, it was always backwards. You got a brand-new policy, and you only take one vote. You're amending an old policy, and you take two. So you should be obviously much more due consideration to a new policy than to an amendment. So we're just asking that we reverse this and have 2 votes for a new policy and 1 vote for an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Chairman?
Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Thank you. I want to offer some thoughts to this, and I hear what the last speaker was saying in terms of it being reverse. My nature, and folks I know witnessed in the last meeting how fast I move, I just think that this would put new policies coming forward in a position, be it if it was correct in the past before, that it would move slowly in order to get something new passed. And I think the general, feedback I think of public about government in general is that government moves too slow. So it would be, just again, my opinion on this is that I think it should just be 1 vote. If it comes out of a subcommittee, comes before the full body, and the full body supports it, let's move on and move on to the next item of business.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gonzalez. Any other questions or comments?
I do. I have a comment.
Daly?
I just want to respond to Mr. Gonzalez. I think for the, excuse me, for the context of policies that we have had to pass in the past, that it is really helpful for us to do our due diligence, and it does provide some sense of notice for the public when we're doing a new policy if we do vote twice, because then the first time people might miss it, but the second time they'll have the opportunity to engage, and if they have questions or concerns about anything, then they would have the opportunity to put that forth if we had 2 votes. If we only had 1 vote, then you're waiting for it to be passed, and then if people have a problem with it or questions, now we have to revisit, put it back through subcommittee again, and it becomes problematic. So I think for the sake of democracy and for us to have more transparency for the public, that 2 votes would be better for us to do it in that way for the sake of transparency.
Thank you, Ms. Naylor. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion on the floor?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Hurst, go ahead.
Do we know if our rules that we follow, Robert's rules, gives any sort of opinion on this?
I didn't hear the last half of your question.
Do we know if our current rules that we follow, Robert's rules, does it give any opinion on how many times to vote on a new versus?
In every other organization that I've ever been in that follows Robert rules, it's the way we're going with it now.
Okay.
It's something new, takes 2 different meetings to consider, and an amendment takes 1. So we're actually coming in line to it then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hurst. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Ms. Gresham, yeah.
So just to get a clarification, so on a new policy, we would do 2 votes, correct?
Correct.
And then on the amendment would be 1. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gresham. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, there's a motion on the floor.
So move.
Motion by Ms. Naylor, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Collins. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
No.
Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient votes, this matter passes. Thank you very much. We'll now move to D, approve the changes to the BEB policy. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. BEB policy is a special school committee meetings policy. Minor changes were made and updated by Attorney Phelps, and committee member Chris Collins can speak to this policy change.
Mr. Collins, please.
Sure, we needed to do a little cleanup language in there where there was a permissive word "shall" that needed to be changed. And this is so that it's clear that members of this committee can have we have 2 policies we'll vote on, ways to get something put on the agenda. And so you'll see that this is to make the language more clear how to get something put on an agenda if it hasn't been on an agenda already.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Any questions or comments? I did have one question, though. If somebody's looking to do a special here, you're saying 3 members can call it not a majority of 4, plus it's the chairman or the chairwoman that usually calls a meeting. This indicates a vice chairman, he or she could call a meeting too, so I do have a question on that.
To call a special meeting, if you had to have 4, what it would have done is shown that you had had deliberation among a quorum of the committee, and you don't ever want to have deliberation outside of a meeting. So keeping the number at 3, where 3 members can make the written request, you're below the threshold of violating the open meeting law.
I understand that, but isn't it usually with, to count majority, you'd have to have a majority of school committee members to call that special, plus it would be the chair that would call that special, not the vice chair.
May I? Oh. So part of the other reason why we did it that way, Mr. Mayor, is that there can be a written request to have a meeting, but we still cannot have a meeting without a quorum. So the request can be made, and if we don't have at least a quorum show up, the meeting cannot happen.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Hurst, yes.
I also just want to make note that during the subcommittee, we had the previous policy, and the previous policy did stipulate chair or vice chair. So that was not a change. That had been in the existing policy as well.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, because in the paperwork I received, there was you had red line there, an addition.
It was, you're correct. When we got the subcommittee,
Yeah.
it was red-lined out to only allow the chair, and we asked for that piece to return to the existing policy, which allowed for both the chair and the vice chair.
Is that with Robert's rules? I know, we have anybody legally here today?
It does follow Robert's rules. We reviewed Robert's rules at the subcommittee.
Just want to clarify any
Yeah.
major changes being made. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Vice Chair.
I do have a question. Perhaps the joint chairs can answer this. So how is this supposed to work? Because the way that I'm reading it, it says that the meeting can be called or shall be called by the chair or vice chair upon the written request of 3 school committee members. Is that to understand that 3 members would either email the chair or the vice chair requesting the meeting, and then the chair or the vice chair would then call it after the request of 3 members? Is that the way it's, the workflow of how it actually works?
3 members can email. Email is a form of written communication, so that is acceptable. Now, the vice chair may be one of those 3. That you don't give up your right as a committee member. So if the vice chair and 2 others wrote and said they wanted it, then either the chair or the vice chair shall call the meeting. It's no longer permissive. It used to say may.
Any other? Go ahead, Ms. Hurst.
I was just going to provide some clarity to Vice Chair Gonzalez. So during the subcommittee, and with respect to the suggestions that the mayor was talking about earlier, they had redlined chair, they had redlined 2 to make it 3, I believe, and then it was also stipulated that it couldn't be 3 members that served on any quorum. But based on the composition of this body, that would have made it even more difficult for us to call a special committee member. So we decided upon this language because it was the least restrictive that would allow us to call a special committee meeting if necessary.
Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about the institution long before, or long after, excuse me, we're no longer sitting here. And the only issue that I have with this is that thinking about that workflow and how it actually works, the chair or the vice chair would receive the written request. Now, technically, let's play this out, the chair or the vice chair can merely be unresponsive and/or, say, pocket veto this request.
Under the old language, they could. Under this, they can't.
But what I'm saying is they would have to say that they've actually received this written request. You see what I'm saying? That they still have, you see what I'm saying?
Well, but you have documentation. The 3 emails would show that the request was made.
But if I'm understanding this correctly, you'd also have to give the Madam Superintendent or staff the appropriate time. If research or information had to be garnered at that point in time, am I correct?
Research, pardon me?
Any backup information needed for that special meeting?
Right, you'd have to,
Following the,
you'd see the 3 emails, the 3 requests, which are going to go through when we have a secretary to the school committee who would have them, and see the 3 emails. And you have to, what you have to make sure is that all 3 of them are asking for the meeting on the same topic,
yeah.
okay? Because a special meeting can only deal with whatever that topic is that it's been requested for. Nothing else can take place at a special meeting except for that topic that it was called for.
I guess the point that I was, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I guess the point that I was trying to get to is, why not just leave the language, shall be called by the chair or the vice chair? Why the added layer of the written request?
It was always upon written request.
No, I understand that that's what it stated in the past, but I'm just questioning why that layer? Why not make it more efficient that the chair or the vice chair can just call the meeting?
Well, they can call, the chair could call a special meeting as the chair of the committee if there was something that came up, something of an emergency nature, for example.
Yeah, that's a different.
But having the 3 requests shows that there was a desire of members of the committee to have a meeting. If you did it verbally, it leaves it open to, well, I didn't hear 3 people ask me. You know, I think you're eliminating any ambiguity by saying 3 people making the request in writing.
May I add as well, the special meetings can only be called for certain circumstances, and if we don't have documentation to provide justification that those circumstances were met, then we're in violation of the open meeting law because you have to give people a certain amount of time to prepare. So with a special meeting, we don't have to do that, but if you don't have it documented that there was this emergency or there was this urgent thing that we're requesting, then that can leave it open to also people filing an open meeting law violation against us.
Yeah, because, a good point, that's what I was making before, Mr. because it says here, if a special school committee meeting is called due to a sudden, generally unexpected occurrence or a set of circumstances demanding immediate action, the school committee shall give public notice of special emergency meeting as soon as practical, which the meeting shall be held pursuant of the requirements of the Massachusetts open meeting law. This would be for some, God forbid, some extreme.
Those are emergency situations, unfortunately, like a tornado, which we all remember.
Right. So this is not to be used, it's for really
Right.
type, okay.
And if I may add to Mr. Mayor, that's why we have the language of the 3 members, because we do not want a chair or vice chair who may just determine at any moment that they want to have a special meeting. We need to make sure that there are some requirements that are met in order for us not to be in violation of the open meeting law.
And that's why not the majority of 4.
Right. And we did have an attorney at the meeting when we were going back and forth through this to make sure that it was in alignment, and that we were not asking for anything that was going to put us in jeopardy.
I'm glad we're able to clarify, not only for myself, but also for the viewing audience. Any other questions or comments? Hearing, you cannot, sir. This is with all due respect, this is thank you very much. Is there any other questions or comments? Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Naylor, is there a second?
Mr.
Second.
Yeah, Ms. Hurst.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had a question, Ms. Gresham.
No, I was just seconding it, that's all.
Motion made by Ms. Naylor, seconded by Mr. Collins. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient votes, matter passed. Thank you very much. E is to approve, a lot of acronyms. E is to approve the changes of the BEDB policy, which is sort of a subset of this policy.
Yes.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Bless you. Salute. Dr. Denal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So BEDB is, again, another school committee agenda item concerning the agenda. All the pertinent changes have been highlighted in yellow on your copies, and the new lettering convention or naming convention for policies are in place, therefore BEDB. It's a policy.
T-shirts will be coming shortly. Mr. Collins, you want to elaborate?
Yes, Mr. Collins will elaborate.
This is a policy that actually we've had for a long time, but people forgot about it. Anytime, if any one of us wants something discussed at the next school committee meeting, under new business, you make the request for it to be put on the next agenda. And this is the codification of that. It's been there for a long, long time.
And again, that also gives time for Madam Superintendent, Dr. Dole, and staff to prepare any
Right.
information that is needed, and the public notice will go out at that point in time.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yeah, Ms. Hurst?
To my colleagues that were on that subcommittee, can I call your attention to the paragraph that says any school committee, subcommittee member? I thought that we were going to omit next scheduled because subcommittees are not typically scheduled in advance, but scheduled when there is a reason to meet.
You're right. We did say we were going to
Getting
fix
rid of-
that language,
Any school committee, are you in the
Second paragraph.
the second to the last.
second to the last paragraph, the one highlighted?
Yeah.
You are correct. At the subcommittee meeting, we said to strike the words "at the next scheduled subcommittee meeting."
Okay, so be the fourth paragraph?
Right.
Okay.
And along that line, if you recall, members who were there, we did away with the last one because if two members of a subcommittee wrote asking for something that would show violation of the open meeting law, that they were discussing it. So that language was actually supposed to have been dropped. The very last highlighted one.
Okay, but on the fourth paragraph, because we could take a friendly,
The fourth one paragraph should say that
the last few words are consider it next scheduled school committee meeting? Subcommittee meeting.
we get rid of the word scheduled because they're not scheduled.
Okay. If we can get a friendly amendment on that, we make the motions, Mr. Collins or Ms. Hurst?
Sir, I would make a motion that we strike the words "next" and "scheduled," so that it now reads, placement on the agenda to be considered at subcommittee meeting,
And are you scratching the last sentence too, the last?
and scratching the last sentence, because there's only 3 members on a subcommittee. If 2 members made a request, that would indicate, or it could be interpreted at least, that there was deliberation ahead of time and you violated the open meeting law.
Ms. Hurst?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. That part I don't recall, because I think that, and we can go back and watch it, but I thought that we wanted to make sure that if 2 subcommittee members wanted to call us a meeting, that it didn't solely rest in the hands of the chair to say yay or nay.
What we agreed on was not so much that, thank you, Mr. Mayor, was not so much that aspect of it, but an agreement of what you wanted was that any school committee member could request. So it would be anybody on the subcommittee or not on the subcommittee could then request that an item be put on the subcommittee agenda.
For the subcommittee?
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
that paragraph that starts with "any" didn't used to start with "any," and it was changed to "any," so that any member of the subcommittee can request that something be put on the subcommittee agenda.
Any member of the subcommittee?
The subcommittee.
Or not any member of the school committee? Any
Any member of the subcommittee.
appropriate subcommittee?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, comments with we're going to have to make a motion on the friendly amendments first, Terry. So if there's only questions or comments on the friendly amendments, which is Mr. Collins to indicate.
I'll make a motion to amend this, what's in front of us, 1, 2, 3, by striking the words "next scheduled" in the 4th paragraph and striking the 5th paragraph entirely.
Terry, you have that, Madam Clerk? Okay. So motion made by Mr. Collins, there's second. Say again, there's a second?
Second.
Second. Naylor, roll call vote is required on the friendly amendment. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
And Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient vote, this matter passes. Thank you. Now, on the overall policy, is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Collins, a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Naylor. Roll call vote is required, please. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Sarno?
Yes, Board of Supervision votes passes. Thank you very much. We'll move to F now. This is to approve access to school security cameras MOU, and I want to thank Superintendent, Madam Superintendent Dr. Denault, and Police Superintendent Larry Akers, who met on this and viewed the crime analysis. I know Superintendent Akers also extended an invitation to school committee members to come to the crime analysis area, and a number did, to see exactly what occurs to keep our students and staff and teachers and administration safe and sound. And I believe in all the years we've had it, I think we might have had to access it 6 times, and of which 3 were false on that. And I'll let the subcommittee people speak on it, but I spoke with Police Superintendent Akers late this afternoon, and Billy Schwartz, who heads our Crime Analysis Division, and Adam, I know Adam Fahn is here too, and they worked very closely on it, and they come to what came out of the committee agreement that will keep our students and teachers and staff administration safe and sound. So thank you, everybody, for doing that. I know that's a relief to parents and family members and staff, students, and teachers. So let me turn it over to Madam Superintendent. Dr. Denault, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we share the same priority of safety in the city, in our classrooms, in every building, and I feel very confident that the use of these cameras in this MOU will support us in our quest and in our pledge to keep our families and our students safe. So I do know that we did have an opportunity to go and visit the facility. We had many meetings, as Mr. Mayor has already stated. Several of the school committee members also went and toured the facility. I was very impressed with the level of professionalism that the civilians used as they accessed the cameras throughout the city, and only accessed the cameras, civilians accessing the cameras, with clear communication with Adam Fenn. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Mr. Fenn to join us at the microphone to share additional information.
And just as a side note, one of my former interns, Reina Diaz, who went on to work at the police department in crime analysis, and now she's been procured, I should say, Josh Garcia, Mayor Garcia, my friend, he's bringing her over there to start a crime analysis division for Holyoke. So, this is hopeful to preventative. God forbid something happens. We've seen what's happened across the country. We're able to pinpoint immediately to keep everybody safe. So, thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Yeah, no, thank you for having
Director.
me. So as we said, the agreement's been in place for 3 years. Real-time crime analysis has accessed the cameras 7 times, 6 of which have been false calls, those swatting calls that we had a number of years ago, last couple of years. But obviously, the SciTech issue that, we all hope and pray never happens again. But this was a perfect example on how those cameras are supposed to work and how this agreement is supposed to work. The civilians, and I want to stress that because there's been a lot of false narratives that I hear out there and going in and out of schools, and these are civilians. These are not police officers accessing these cameras. They work inside the police department, but they are not police officers. They can only access the cameras under the extreme emergency, such as a SciTech that day. They were able to access those cameras immediately when the officer was calling for help, her distress call. They were able to see exactly where the shooter fled, which was out of the school and not into the school. They were able to see what vehicle he got in. They were able to get the license plate. They were also able to see exactly who he was with. And to my understanding, they had at least 1 or 2 people in custody within an hour of that incident.
That's right.
Again, this is exactly how this is supposed to work. The access to the cameras, 7 accesses in the internal cameras in the last 3 years have not led to any arrests. In fact, our arrests are down 97% in the last 15 years. We had 444 arrests in 2008. We had 10 last year. The police officers are not here to arrest our students. They go through specialized training. We make sure they're hand-selected. That is not the goal of the police officers. Seconds count in these instances, okay? If officers can shave off minutes of their response time, knowing who, what, where, and when, it'll undoubtedly save lives. And that is exactly why this is in place. I want to throw in here, and I usually don't talk about the personal side of things, but I'm a father of a 6-year-old. I would want his school district to have every tool in the tool belt to go into his school in an emergency and save lives. And that's what we're doing here, plain and simple. My job is to protect everybody in the school district, staff, students, visitors, everybody. All of the other extra stuff, I don't get involved in, and I'm here for the safety piece of things. This will undoubtedly save lives in an emergency. We saw what happened last week.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. It's going to happen again and again and again. And unfortunately, all we can do is put things in place to try to prevent it and to try to mitigate it when and if it does occur. We pray here it doesn't. We have more in place as a school district, and I'm confident in saying, than most school districts in the country.
We do.
We've invested millions upon millions of dollars. We have more technology than any school district I've talked to. And look, we're continuing to add, and that's my priority. My priority is to keep everybody safe, and I feel like this is a pertinent piece of that puzzle. I feel like we should be looking to add things and not take away. So that's where we stand on it from the safety and security aspect, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we've talked about this quite a few times in the subcommittee meetings over the years, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions or comments for Director Fang? Okay.
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Hurst.
So thank you very much, Mr. Finn and Superintendent and those that worked on it in subcommittee. I do have several things to say, and I have 2 kids who sit in this district. When this, for the viewing public, when this MOU came to us, it came to us very quickly, and it was done in a lot of haste, and no one could explain the impetus. Like, no one could say what happened. It's not like it happened on the heels of Parkland or any other massacre that had occurred in this country. It literally went to subcommittee, and then that following Thursday, it was on the agenda. They had the 4 votes, they pushed it through, and that was it. Even though there was public outcry, let's talk about it, teachers had no idea, parents had no idea, students had no idea. There was very little conversation. The only things that happened were that in the subcommittee meetings, there was an FAQ. Vice Chairman Gonzalez was brand new to the committee at the time, and that went through him. So here we are 3 years later, and we've yet to hold any sort of public inquiry to talk about this. I understand what just happened 2 weeks ago. I've actually been following it and have done my own due diligence and research. And what we do know is that cameras don't stop shootings. They do not stop shootings. Might they help to supplement safety, or might they help to sort of pinpoint, where a person may be or where they left, especially if there's exterior cameras? Yes. But I am very cautious about all of the other things that come along with cameras being in the schools. And yes, they've benefited us, but we can't react out of fear because of what happened at SciTech or because of what happened 2 years ago. Like, if you're talking about let's use all the tools that we have, there are a lot of other tools that are out there that we've not put in place. Just last week when they were talking about the Appalachia shooting in Georgia, they were talking about how much more money they poured into their mental health and social, emotional, behavioral systems. They were talking about the swab cards and the ID cards that they got for teachers and staff, where they hit a button and you can locate where they are. There are several evidence-based models out there that talk about how else we can keep our students safe. And I'll end with saying that this is unprecedented. There are no other districts in the Commonwealth who have these types of cameras. And at the very least, we have got to give our community an opportunity to weigh in. We could have tons of people who come in and say, nope, I want cameras, absolutely. But what is missing from the last process and this process is that we've had no community input. Boston hasn't done this, Worcester hasn't done it, right up the street in Holyoke, they haven't done it. No one in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has done this, and there are several research that point to cameras not being the sole solution of keeping our kids safe.
Thank you, Ms. Hurst. Any other questions or comments?
May I, Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Naylor?
Definitely appreciate the commentary from Mrs. Hurst, because I think it is important for us to focus not just on one aspect of safety. I do have an ask, and I think on the heels of what you just said, Mrs. Hurst, is that I, too, have children in the district, and I, too, want to make sure that they are safe. And this this is going to expire any day now. And so my request would be, could we, again, have a short-term approval where we do not go backwards, as you just said, Mr. Finn, that we don't want to take away, we want to add, but give us time to be able to do some type of a community conversation so that we can inform people, because I think to your point earlier, Mr. Finn, people did not know it's not surveillance. They thought it was surveillance. People did not know that we have civilians, not police officers, in that space. And I think we have to educate folks so that they understand that this is what it is and not just force something on them. So I do think that at the end of the day, our community will say the same thing. We want to make sure that our folks are safe once they understand what it is. But I also do not want to take away something that we have in place that could be a safety measure, and something happened tomorrow and then we're like, oh man, we're in a bad situation. So I would ask if the committee is willing to amend this particular item on the agenda to say that we approve it for a time frame, be it 90 days or 180 days or something that gives a sufficient amount of time for the district to respond so that we can have some type of a community conversation.
You could probably do that in parallel tracks. I believe this is for, is it 3 years, am I correct?
Yeah.
And again, we did increase our mental health budget tremendously this past year on it, and you could still hold a meeting or put the information out there, which has been put out there numerous times, but I don't want to be playing around with our students, our teachers, or staff's safety, and have something in a 30 or 90 day, 120 day time frame, then all of a sudden it's out the door. So, I mean, you could do something on parallel tracks, but I would urge the school committee, and I've had these conversations with Dr. Denal too, you know, we haven't had any episodes here, and we don't want to have any episodes occur on it. So could we put some more things to enhance? But the cameras, again, if something was to occur, God forbid, as happened at only one time in Sci-Tech, that pinpointed exactly where the incident was occurring, exactly how to attack and save individuals in an incident, and exactly how to make an arrest within an hour's time on that. So, you know, the majority of the people, no matter what creed, color, or background, want their children, the teachers, staff members safe and sound. This is cutting edge besides the millions and millions of dollars we've done to harden our schools and targets. You read about these terrible things occurring, God forbid, across the country. And you see at time with the lax, I don't want to say lax, but as you said, Adam, nobody is doing this, many of the things that we're doing here. So I would err on the side of caution. I would urge passage of this, but with Ms. Naylor and Ms. Hurst, an informational meeting, that's fine. We're going to reiterate what's been said a number of times. And once again, the superintendent, police superintendent, Larry Akers, invited all school committee members to come view that crime analysis division to see for themselves how exactly it operates under civilian leadership there, and the guidelines that are specific in this MOU, how anything is accessed. And it really has to do with an emergency, life-threatening situation or a fire situation, something on that. And there's an agreement how that has to be accessed. So I would not agree to moving to a 30-day, a 60-day, a 90-day, 120 days. This came out of subcommittee agreement that about the 3-year with the MOU with some minor adjustments made that the committee agreed to, Madam Superintendent Dr. Denal, and Police Superintendent Larry Akers, and Head of Crime Analysis Billy Schwartz on it. And I think we need to move forward. It's fine to hold an informational meeting if some community members have questions, and that could be reiterated once again. Vice Chair Gonzalez, when this came up some time ago, we did put a Q&A out explaining the whole situation to the public. And our bottom line, I would think to the public too, is that they want their children, teachers, staff, and administration safe and sound, and better use anything at our disposal. And as Ms. Naylor indicated, God forbid, and that something occurred and, well, it lapsed in 90 days and we had to call a meeting to look at it. So I have no issue about having a, public meeting if people want to, maybe under discretion and public chair safety, but I would urge passes on this. And then both sides worked very closely together in my conversation with Superintendent and with Superintendent Police Lawrence Akers. Ms. Gresham?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, the most important thing with us is health and safety of our students. And I agree with Ms. Naylor, amending it for 90 days, and within that 90-day time frame, have a public meeting, get input from the community. I mean, that's the only right thing to do, because they need to know exactly what's going on when it comes to the health and safety of their child. Right?
Well, we're looking at, what we're doing is to keep them safe and sound. I just hate to see any type of a lapse, with all due respect. God forbid something was to happen. What happened with your cameras? The agreement lapsed on it. So you could do it again, and you can do it, and you can have the meeting. But in the meantime, we got to make sure we keep our kids, students, and teachers, staff safe and sound. Ms. Hurst?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, and I apologize for not saying it in my initial comments. So I think that the one thing that we can all agree on is that we want to keep our kids and our staff safe, absolutely. But 3 years ago, and even now, the issue with having cameras inside our school, we understand them on the exterior, and that's my understanding of how some of the site tech came to resolution, was by way of the exterior cameras. We have a majority-minority school district, and there's real implications to a student of color's mental health with feeling as though they may be being surveilled or over-policed. Those are things that we cannot deny. That is a part of creating a culture of excellence, of learning. That is at the crux of this issue. So, as I said before, it is possible that you could get the majority of parents who could come in and say, nope, I do want cameras, students who say, I do want cameras. Then they get to provide and be a part of that input. But if we don't hear anything and allow that to influence what it is that we vote in a policy like this that's been in place for 3 years, and continue to pass it without hearing from the folks that are most effective, we are not doing right by our constituents.
Thank you, Ms. Hurst. Adam, could you clarify when these cameras are on? And please, also, the move 3 years ago was to be proactive, because you had a number of shootings that were occurring across the country. And we didn't want to sit back and have something, God forbid, happen to any of our children, students, teachers, and staff. So we look to be very proactive on it. But could you explain when these cameras are on, are off?
Yeah, and first, I just want to acknowledge everything that everybody said. I respect it, I appreciate it, and you know, I want to just say that everything we do in security is a proactive approach. You're 100% right. You're absolutely right that the police access, the civilian access in real time is not going to prevent a tragedy such as we saw last week. It is going to exponentially lower the response time and let them know exactly who they're dealing with and what they're doing. Cameras in school are a proactive approach where our security guards, the administration, interior, exterior, are monitoring them and do stop things every single day that could potentially be happening. People outside, people inside, things of that nature. So for this school use, and again, there's no cameras in bathrooms or classrooms or anything of that nature. They're all in public areas, the hallways, non-teaching areas. You know, again, we stop things every day proactively with the cameras. What we're referring to here, and the mayor said it as well, we also have to look at this outside the lens of this is just police. And believe it, you know, the narrative that there's a police officer in a dark room surveilling our kids, it's just not true.
It's not true.
And again, this is for emergencies. And we all think worst case scenario, active shooter, right? That's what everybody thinks. But the mayor said it could be a fire. could be a gas leak. We're talking all first responders. We're talking medical, we're talking fire, police, all of them. And of course, we all go to the worst case scenario here because that's what we all think of. But this agreement is in place where they are not watching the cameras, and that's why it's not going to stop something from happening. They are turning them on when a call goes out
Comes in.
to then direct the police officers where they are going. The SciTech issue was both interior and exterior. The interior cameras were immediately accessed to know he did not flee inside the school. I think I've said this a few times in public at these meetings, that it was the longest 7-minute car ride of our lives getting up there because we had heard all sorts of stories about what was going on. But the reality is, real time, and the school staff were able to identify very quickly that they left the building. They left the building. They were not inside the building. They left, then they were able to go immediately back, get descriptions, see who entered the building, see who was in there. The exterior cameras certainly help with the vehicle they were driving, the license plate, which direction they went. So they both came in handy. But again, they're not watching these cameras. They're not surveilling anybody. Again, I would love for everyone to go see the operation there because it is quite impressive. They have all city cameras, DPW, all sorts of different city entities. They have access to their cameras. So again, this is a proactive approach, but everything we do in security is proactive. And that's what we preach to our security guards. That's what we preach to the staff. Be proactive and try to stop things before they happen. In this case, obviously, they're not going to be able to do that. But the cameras in the schools themselves that are being monitored by a security guard and the administration are very, 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 very handy to what we do every single day to stop things that are going on.
So again, just to clarify, that the only time that would go on in those comments, if something, God forbid, was to occur, then in the agreement, vice versa, automatically the crime analysis saying, we need to zoom in right away. And as you stated already, you have staff, Springfield Public School staff and administration on their own cameras monitoring, not police, not civilian dispatch. So again, this is used specifically, God forbid, if something had arisen and a call would have to go out. There's an agreement, and there's a code and an agreement that's saying, we have a specific incident going on. Can you zoom in right now? So no one from the police department or dispatch or their crime analysis is watching our kids. So let's get that right off, number one. And we've said that a number of times here. You already have cameras there that are being monitored by Springfield School Department officials. So this only comes in, and 7 times this has been used in 3 years. 7 times. And 6 of those times were the swatting calls that were going on. But you got to take those seriously. The one time was a SciTech, in which we were able to intervene very, very quickly, stop people from getting hurt or worse, and make arrests within an hour's time. So, I mean, this false narrative out there saying they're watching our kids. No, they're not. Springfield Public School officials and employees are watching the kids, not the Springfield Police Department, nor is it crime analysis. There was an agreement in the MOU there. If something was to occur, and it could be something else, a fire, God forbid, some other calamity that could occur there, that they know exactly, zoom in on hall number 13 there, doorway number 45, bing, okay, we got it there. Now our first responders know how to respond exactly and quickly. So again, this false narrative that police are monitoring these cameras 24/7 in our schools is wrong. It's not occurring. Civilian dispatch, and they only go on if something drastically would occur on the call from school department officials. And in the meantime, school department officials are monitoring their own cameras. So you're making this argument then, so it's okay for school department officials to do it, but it's not okay if an emergency situation occurs, but they're not surveilling this 24/7. So let's get that false narrative out there. I urge you to pass this. I have no issue, Ms. Hurst or Ms. Naylor, about doing a meeting or have people maybe explain it even more. Again, Vice Chair Gonzalez, we put a Q&A out a few years ago on this, explaining this situation. The school department, the police department worked very closely together. Superintendent Akers, Superintendent Denal. So your questions have been answered. You want to hold a public meeting or have a subcommittee meeting, Ms. Gresham, that's fine. But to put this on a 30, 60, 90-day temporary thing, and God forbid something happens and we can't get this up and running again because we need an agreement, then what, if something happens, the parents are going to be saying to you, what happened to my kid here? And God forbid nothing has happened. So nobody is watching your kids from the police department. No police officer. We made an edict many years ago to get police officers out in the street, and we civilianized a number of things, from dispatch to crime analysis, which were cutting edge, one of the few in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that have this technology, stuff that you watch on TV. So a meeting, a community has some question, fine. But don't say, hey, let's just do 90 days, and then we'll revisit it. Meantime, in that time frame, God forbid if something's going to happen, what do you do then? What do you do then? Where were the police? Why wasn't there a response? Why didn't you save my kid? So this is being proactive. So this is, with all due respect, false narrative. Again, he has indicated it, it's the MOU. Nobody is watching these 24. Nobody is monitoring your children. Springfield public school officials are monitoring your children. Not the police department, nor the crime analysis. This is only for emergency situations, of which in 3 years, there were 7. 6 which were false swatting, which have to be taken seriously. 1, the sci-tech issue, which, God forbid, could have been tremendously worse of people getting hurt or worse. Arrests were made within an hour's time. So, I mean, that's the facts. Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
No, I think I would just indicate to Mr. Murphy.
Oh, okay.
It's up to you. Whoever-
No, go ahead, Attorney Murphy, then I'll go to Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question. It's Mr. Finn, right? Yep. So the cameras, my recollection, I think I'm right, is that after Sandy Hook, we, pretty much everybody in the country kind of hardened our schools' buildings, right? I know that we made sure all our doors locked, we put more cameras in, better cameras, et cetera. We put perimeters around the buildings, that kind of thing. So really, since Sandy Hook, these cameras have been in place. I'm not saying they're the same cameras, but they've been there, right?
Yeah, my understanding there's been cameras in the schools for well before me. I've been here 11 years, so there's
Right,
been
for
cameras.
like over a decade.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Over a decade, these have been here. Okay. So, I mean, I would just say I agree with the mayor, and I think with everybody else that really, in my view, this is about the safety of our children. And like Ms. Naylor and Ms. Hurst, all of my children attended the Springfield Public Schools. I still have one that is at Putnam, and he was there the day that the shooting was at SciTech. So, this is real. I mean, it's almost come home to Springfield, but it's not as bad as what happened in Georgia and Uvalde and Parkland and Sandy Hook, and the list goes on and on and on. And I've looked at several studies, academic studies, not political papers, and there is a disturbing increase in the nation in mass shootings and in particular school shootings. There have been over 40 school shootings this year alone, just schools. And there is nothing that, at this point, we have to deal with it. We can't put our head in the sand and say, it's not going to happen here, because really it already did. And that one time that it did happen, your system, our system, helped, at least in part, to solve that crime. And we talk about mental health, and it is important, and I think for many, many years we neglected funding for mental health. But we've remedied that, and we've changed that. And there are two sides, in my view, to the mental health issue, because what happens at SciTech when there's a shooting, that's not good for kids' mental health either. If what happened at Parkland and Uvalde and Sandy Hook, and the list goes on, that's not good for mental health. So I think that we need, if we have an ability to save one child, 2 children, a staff member, a custodian, whatever the case may be, I think that we should do it. I have utmost faith in Commissioner Akers. It's been on the agenda. The matter was on the agenda, I think, in June. We delayed it so that the new superintendent could review it. We debated it 3 years ago. There was lots of public input at that time. There seems to be less now. It seems to be less of a contentious issue. Most of the people that I speak to, including parents who are texting me now, are very much in favor of this program because they think it's going to make their kids safer in the face of a potential tragedy. So I tend to agree with the mayor and I think some others that we've debated this issue. It's about safety. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect system, but it could help save somebody's life someday, and I think we should vote in favor of it.
Thank you, Attorney Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Just a point of information here before we go to Mr. Collins. Once again, in 2008, and I just taken over as mayor, we had nearly over 400 arrests.
444.
444 arrests. And we made a statement there that this is going to go down. We are down 96, 97%. So this is not over.
But no arrests have led or have been the result of any of these cameras
Yeah.
being accessed.
That's right. Mr. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few points. As Attorney Murphy just mentioned, and it's true, and the discussion hasn't made this quite clear, cameras have been in schools for a long, long time. This is not new. Cameras are in schools all over the state. I'm in and out of schools around the state all the time. You go into any school and you'll see a security desk with cameras that are viewable lifetime, and they're recorded can't remember a school in the past 3 years I've been in where they don't have them. So cameras have been around a long time. What the subject of this MOU, and when it came up 3 years ago, and again it was not entered into lightly. It took a long time. And when Vice Chair Gonzalez was in charge of that subcommittee at the time, there were several subcommittee meetings. It went on and on, going back and forth, and one of the things that came out of those subcommittee meetings was a question and answer that went onto the website, which was an excellent idea that came out of that subcommittee. What this MOU does, and what it did when we decided to go into it 3 years ago, was saying that technology is there. And why this is unique is if the technology is there and where it can be used to save in the case of emergency, to create a much safer situation, then let's find a way to utilize the technology that's already in place with a very, very specific set of guide rails that how and when and who. And it took a long time to develop that as to how any of these cameras could be accessed. And that's and it took probably 2 years to develop this even before it got to subcommittee, going back and forth. So there were a large number of subcommittee meetings, and those are all public meetings that were held and to develop this. And what all this MOU does is say, let's take the technology that we have and let's use it under very limited and specific circumstances to make everybody, students and everybody in the schools, as safe as we possibly can. The one thing that I do agree with Mrs. Naylor is it's not well communicated out there. And even though we've got question and answer on our own website, and even though we've had a number of meetings, probably the average person doesn't have a clue as to the content of what we're talking about. I would urge that we do pass this completely, but I also would ask that the police department voluntarily add this to their sector meetings and discuss it at the sector meetings so that the public, and they hold them all the time. I know we all get those voicemails. Sector H is meeting such and such a night, and put this out there. And so that people have a chance to hear. And unfortunately, Adam, that's going to make some work for you because you go to those sector meetings. But I think we do need to get the misunderstandings about this cleared up by having it added to those public meetings that are already taking place and where people are focused on the issue of safety anyway. So I would urge that we pass this MOU this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Collins, and I'm sure through Superintendent Dr. Denol and Adam, we can, with Superintendent Akers, because there are numerous police neighborhood meetings that go on, beat meetings, beat management meetings, the C3 meetings that go on, to put it out there. That does not preclude Ms. Hurst or Ms. Naylor or Ms. Gresham that a subcommittee meeting could be called to explaining these points that we put out there, clarifying these points, putting the facts out there about your children not being surveilled by the Springfield Police Department. Any other questions or comments?
I do want to state that I am not prepared to vote yes in favor of the item on the agenda if we are not willing to do our due diligence. My recollection of what happened 3 years ago is very different than what you just stated, Mr. Collins. The initial meeting that we had, the initial subcommittee meeting, did happen 2 days or 3 days before the actual vote that occurred on that Thursday. However, at that time, Mrs. Perez was over the subcommittee for legislative and contracts. When Mr. Gonzalez came, Vice Chair Gonzalez came, we had another meeting because there were still conversations lingering where we did do a FAQ, which again was not something that we were okay with, but we compromised because there was no way to rescind the actual policy. When the policy was recreated, that is when we were informed of all of these additional details. And my concern is, if we as school committee members are going back and forth clarifying things, then the general or average person in the public is absolutely not aware or understanding what we are doing. So I feel, and I am making a motion to vote for the changed way that I stated it, that I would vote that we approve access to the school security cameras, MOU, for 120 days, which would give us the time to be able to have our public meeting that we are asking for, and that way we do not lapse on the access to the cameras in the meantime. So that is what I am proposing and what I am proposing to make a motion on.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hurst. On the motion, roll call vote. A yes vote postpones the overall contract as far as just 120 days. A no vote moves us forward to vote on this contract as agreed to coming out of subcommittee.
Just point of clarification, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the motion was to approve it for 120 days, not to delay it for 120 days.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are absolutely right.
For 120 days, but just to clarify that this, again, out of subcommittee. So 120 days, which then there's a period, if it's not acted upon, the contract, it goes away, the cameras go away, which is not the way we should go. So on the motion, Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just, to address the concern about this potentially lapsing, and for you, Mr. Fenn, and your staff and everybody else who's taking care of the security of our children and students, I would also ask that the Chairwoman Naylor, because this is in your subcommittee, that we move on this expeditiously in terms of scheduling the public input meeting, so we don't wait so close to that 120-day motion deadline that you've proposed, so that way we can ensure that, we're going to, there's going to be no lapse in terms of safety and security. So my hope would be, I guess, and my encouragement to the whole committee is that we would get that public input meeting done, I don't know, in the next 30 to 45 days.
And what happens if there is a lapse for some reason? It's happened before. What happens if there's a lapse? There's been lapses on other issues, and God forbid something happens to one of our students or teachers.
Mr. Mayor, if we can do it within the 120 and 120 days.
We've had other things linger for longer than that. God, this is, I understand, but I'm speaking on the motion. This is serious business here. You have agreed upon contract for MOU, mutually agreed upon by both entities for 3 years to keep our children and students and teachers safe and sound. The questions have been addressed. They've been answered. There's been stuff out there in public. Information is very, very accessible. We put it out there. I don't want to gamble on the safety of our students. So, I know there's a motion on the floor, but if something should occur and something lapses in 120 days, and then the fingers are going to start getting pointed, why didn't you stop that? Why weren't you able to quell that? Well, we couldn't, because we couldn't get a meeting scheduled, we couldn't get a quorum scheduled, and that's happened before. That's happened before on other, on other issues. People want to deem this as a controversial issue. I don't believe it's a controversial issue.
Mayor, can I just say one?
Attorney Murphy.
One last thing. It sounds like we're all pretty fixed in our positions, but just to Ms. Naylor and Ms. Hurst's point, if I'm recollecting this correctly, Ms. Perez was here and voted on the original policy. Then there was an election, right? And we all ran in that election, and we won, right? People that were on both sides of that. But I remember in that election, at many, many forums that we were at, and in general, in the public, people were talking about this all the time. This was an issue for people in that election. I mean, and we had an election. People could have voted any way they wanted. They reelected pretty much everybody, and Josiah was new.
Excuse me.
I'm just saying, it was debated in public. I know it wasn't in our meetings, I get it, but it was certainly something that was discussed, all the time at every forum that I went to during an election.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yes, if Attorney Murphy is done. Are you done? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Hurst.
I just
So Attorney
I just
Murphy,
forgot about the election.
Attorney Murphy, let me just say this to you. So, I'm not sure which forums you attended, but I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that all of the forums that Ms. Monroe Naylor and I attended, and even one of the ones that was held and Mr. Gonzalez attended, it was the number one question that we were asked, and I would go as far as to say that is probably why we did so well, Tonya and I, or Ms. Naylor and I, in our elections. I remember the day that it was the question was posed to Vice Chair Gonzalez on the virtual forum, and Mr. Gonzalez said, "I am so sorry, I have not had the opportunity to review that policy in its entirety, and I cannot ask that question, I cannot answer that question." And I will tell you, they came down on him like piranhas. So, we serve the city at large, but we also have very different constituencies that feel very differently about this issue. So yes, we were reelected, and there are a lot of variables as to why and who elected us, but I guarantee you that was the number one question that we received.
And
I mean, not to quibble, Mayor, but just
Go ahead,
all
Attorney.
I'm saying is that it was a big issue, as you
was a
pointed out,
huge issue.
and the public was well aware of it, discussed it over and over again at every forum, as you said, probably the number one issue in that election. And so to say that the public doesn't know about it, I think is a little bit...
So I don't think it's so much that the public
bit-
doesn't know about it, and let's also be really clear about this. When, and we can go back in the minutes, when this issue came before us, it literally came before us like 2 to 3 days before it hit the Thursday agenda. And I remember that as a part of that meeting and all of the meetings that happened subsequent to that, we kept saying, well, what happened? Like, why? What was the impetus? Why are we doing this now? Like, we know that we have internal cameras, and the difference is that we don't have the surveillance or the active,
Real-time analysis.
the real-time analysis piece. But we literally asked. I remember when Reverend Dr. Calvin McFadden was sitting on this, and it was following one of those mass shootings. We sat here and had a full conversation about, like, what else do we need to do? How else can we keep our kids safe? And never one time was there any talk about real-time crime analysis. No one even knew that that conversation was happening until it made a subcommittee, and then within hours, days later, made the full meeting. It was not a transparent process at all.
Can I just say this, Mr. Okay. The proof's in the pudding. The program has been successful, number one. Number two, arrests. 444 arrests, 2008, I just became mayor. Down 96, 97%. Who's surveilling who? Question, you're watching my kids. No, you're not. That's been addressed 10,000 times. Those cameras are only turned on for any type of catastrophic incident, with agreement from the school department and the police department crime analysis. In those 3 years, they've gone on 7 times. 6 times for swatting, which has unfortunately been taken seriously, and 1 time for SciTech.
Mr. Mayor, may I call a question?
But I'm just pointing out, you've had a successful program. You're saying, people out there, my kid is being surveilled. No, they're not. They're being watched by Springfield School Department officials, but not by the police department nor by crime analysis. Arrests are down 96, 97%. So, bringing up these, we need to have a meeting, we need to do this, we're answering those questions right now. Pass the MOU. Have the public meetings, and we'll say the same things again. Instead of creating an issue here that's not here. They're watching my kids. Nobody's watching your kids from the police department of crime analysis. My kids are getting arrested. No, they're not. So what is the issue? And I do remember that election. There was a lot of meetings and comments done at that point in time. So everybody keeps going back to 3 years ago. Look what's been accomplished. It's been a successful program. So hark back to successful program. The checks and balances are in there. The myths have been dispelled. Why play around with our children's safety, our teachers and staff's safety? And let's do a 120-day, let's see how it goes. And again, it's happened before on issues here where a meeting can't be called, a quorum is not present, even with the best intentions.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Naylor, go ahead.
I did put out a request of call to question so that we
Question
can.
to be called on the amendment. Again. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, he didn't recognize you for calling the question. And I just have one comment on your motion to delay. We are at the end of a 90-day extension right now.
Yeah.
And we haven't been able to take action in that time. One thing, and so the 120 days does scare me a little bit that we'll be back again and with everybody saying it's rushed, it's at the last minute. And the other thing that I would remind people is that this agreement allows for it to be amended at any point. So if we pass it, if we don't delay it and we pass it this evening, we still have the ability to hold public meetings and take input over a longer period of time. And then if there are valid amendments that the public brings forward, to bring them back and consider them. We always have that option.
Okay, the question has been called. Ms. Naylor has amending the agreement to only go to 120 days. It's been seconded, I believe, by Ms. Hurst. Roll call vote.
Just a point of order. If you want to just go to the vote, fine, but just so that we are following Robert's rules, when someone calls a question, the first vote is supposed to be to call the question, shut off debate, and then go back to it. But if we just want to go to the vote and you want to withdraw the call.
All right, the motion to call.
Otherwise, we got to take.
On the motion to call the question, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
And Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient votes, matter passes. Now on the amendment to only do this contract for 120 days made by Ms. Naylor and seconded by Ms. Hurst. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
No.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
No.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Sarno?
No. The amendment passes.
Thank you.
I would urge the appropriate committees to make sure that the proper meetings are called so this can be revisited at the appropriate time to get this contract resolved. As Mr. Collins indicated, you already had a 90-day lapse occurred on this too. Yeah. Playing with the safety of our children. Okay, G is to approve and adopt transportation change in Springfield Public Schools foster care policy. Madam Superintendent, Dr. Denal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Marissa McCarthy is here to speak further. I'm going to ask her to make her way to the microphone. We are in full support of all of our students and definitely in support of our students in DCF care, and we want to make sure that we continue their education regardless of the other extenuating circumstances that have placed them in DCF care. So Dr. Marissa McCarthy is here to speak of the language that we have aligned to federal regulations to ensure that our policy meets the needs of our students.
Thank you.
Having me. What you'll see is a change to the policy specific around transportation. We have aligned our language with the federal regulations. We've taken out that SPS will not provide transportation to students in foster care and are adding language that aligns with the federal regulations that we will coordinate with DCF to ensure that students in foster care are able to get transportation to their school of origin, should they be living outside of Springfield.
Thank you, Director McCarthy. Any questions or comments?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Hurst?
Dr. McCarthy, so does this align with the McKinney-Vento? How does this differ?
It's different than McKinney-Vento because this is specific for foster children, so students who are in foster care, yes.
So if a child gets placed outside of the city in a foster home in South Hadley, we will then pick up transportation.
We will coordinate with
What does that mean?
So coordinate means that we will work with them. So often when a student is placed, say in South Hadley, for example, there's often a best interest determination meeting that takes place to determine if it's best for the student to stay in Springfield, their school of origin, or to go to South Hadley schools. If that's going to be a long-term placement, it's typically what we look at. We coordinate with DCF to make sure as many students as possible stay within the Springfield limits because it just helps ensure consistency for them. But there are times where students are placed outside, and we look at that on a case-by-case basis. So there are times where DCF is coordinating the transportation and they're bringing the students back and forth. We have cases where we have coordinated the transportation and are funding the transportation to come. So it means really a mix of implementation for the transportation to take place.
Thank you, Director McCarthy. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, there's a motion on the floor.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Naylor, is there a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Hurst. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
And Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient votes. This matter passes. Thank you very much. H is to approve school committee legal counsel position. Madam Superintendent, Dr. Denal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. So it's a slight misnomer on the agenda because it really is the scope of services as opposed to a position. So we have Christian Reardon and Pat Roach who will come and speak further on this item.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Ms. Reardon, Mr. Roach, please.
Good evening. So this is what came through subcommittee, and I believe the subcommittee's desire was for us to contract out. So we have a scope of services, and we're going to reach out to NASC and ask, if there's some qualified attorney on who we believe would be a good fit. We're also going to reach out to the Association of School Attorneys as well. And with that, I'm happy.
Yeah, question, is this legal counsel, and again, everything being equal, I would urge us to stay local. That's always been my edict. This position for school committee attorney overall to superintendent of the school department, or is this the school committee?
School committee.
Attorney? Separate.
Just for the school committee.
Yep.
Okay. Is this a part-time position?
Yes, it'd be a contracted position on an as-needed basis.
So, again, as I said before, you're going to we'll have our own attorney for the school department, and we're going to have an attorney for the school committee. Conflict central. I will not be voting in support of this, but just to clarify that if it does go through, this is a part-time position, because I cannot see paying someone $250,000 to come here and give edicts on Robert's rules, and we can have that in-house duplication of efforts there. I know others feel differently, but I think you're setting yourself up for conflict, adherent conflict. Any questions or comments of Mr.
Just a comment, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Collins?
It is not a position, it's not a half-time position. The school committee did make its desire known during the budget setting process that they wanted to separate, they wanted to have the in-house counsel be the in-house counsel and to have the school committee have someone they could go to on their own. And as many districts across the state do it, it's usually a firm that does provide some services for that when they have their own. It did work for us, but it was inherent upon it, even when we started it, that there always could be a time where the wants and desires of the school committee and the wants and the desires of the department might not be 100% aligned.
Yep.
And to have one person trying to answer to two different entities when they're not aligned is a difficult, almost impossible thing. And I think that's why the school committee looked to let the in-house counsel handle everything that does that way, and we'll have someone that if we have questions to, and everybody who was on the subcommittee that was there discussing it, we're clear we don't want another attorney working for the department. We want somebody on call. You see a budget there that we anticipated would be $50,000 in that range somewhere to get the kind of services. And it's hopefully that so that there would never be asked one person to answer to two different bosses that don't agree with each other.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Just a quick question again. Tonight, who would be here tonight? Besides, you know, we're going to get an attorney, but who would be here tonight? Would both be here?
The school committee attorney typically would be the one. That's one of the things that...
Okay, so then what if there's a question pertaining to with Superintendent Denault or the school department? So at times you're going to have both attorneys here, dueling attorneys? I'm just making a clarification here. Tonight, who would have been here tonight? Would we have both here? Because we had policy, things that we're moving on. And what if something came up that had to be addressed that school committee members had and the attorney wasn't here? So I'm just, to me, it's a duplication of efforts here on it. So, but what would happen at that point in time? And if you're going on, we've always told any attorney that we've had or any law firm, as they should, rule on the letter of the law. And if the letter of the law is that, and Robert's rule is that, that's it. So if a school committee member, he or she doesn't like it, and say, well, I want a different ruling on it. So does that come into play now, that attorney will say, well, there really isn't a different ruling, but I just is going to be an inherent conflict here, inherent conflict. But who would be, I'd like to answer my question. Who would be here tonight? The in-house school attorney, or would the school committee's firm be here tonight? Or would they both be here tonight?
The intention discussed in subcommittee is the school committee's firm.
So if we had a question pertaining to direct school department activities, that attorney would just, he or she, sit there with their arms crossed. Am I correct?
May I respond, please? This took place in our subcommittee meeting, and we did ask these questions and have this conversation. Part of the reason why the scope of services is written the way that it is that the individuals from the firm that would be participating in our meetings would be trained on our policies and on anything that they should know in order for them to be present and represent us. I think tonight is a perfect example of what happens if we don't have a firm. We currently do not have a school committee attorney, a district attorney, and we have nobody here, and we have had nobody available to us for almost 2 weeks now. If we would have had a firm, then that person who left would have left, and we would have still had somebody sitting in here to represent the firm to make sure that we are able to answer our questions and be compliant. So we're not looking for an individual. To Dr. Denault's point, it should state on here, legal counsel scope of services, not position, because we're not looking for one person necessarily. We're looking for representation so that we can have our questions and concerns addressed.
Don't we have Buckley Richardson on retainer?
We're not supposed to. We did not extend that contract.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Hurst.
So one, I don't know that the questions that are being posed are fair to Mr. Roach.
Ms.
Ms.
Beard.
Reardon, because it's supposed to be our attorney, right? And we just went through subcommittee with this matter. So this person would be here at this school committee, or whoever the firm was to send. Are there occasions in which we may need for both councils to be present? Perhaps there may be. We go to executive session and we have a labor attorney, and we've had another attorney, and we've had another attorney. So it's not unheard of. I mean, it depends on what the circumstances are. I think that the committee has spoken that we know we need an independent legal counsel. And so some may not agree, but the majority has, and here before us, we have a scope of services, and that is what we need to move forward on. If there is a time in which we need to have 2 attorneys present, then they will be present. But in the meantime, this is saying that the person who's taking up this legal counsel position will attend our meetings. It's outlined on the second page, and it gives them an approximate number of subcommittee and full school committee meetings, as well as a calendar of when they would need to be present.
So just a quick question, if, again, I always, the experts, whether it was former Superintendent Warwick or now Dr. Sonia Denault, if the administration or the leadership, the leader of our Springfield Public School system says this is the way we should go with expertise, and the school committee or some, whether it's a minority or disagrees, we don't agree with that, then you're going to have this attorney dealing with school department attorney. I could potentially see that happening. I mean, Ms. Hurst mentioned already about the majority. We've had a number of times where majority votes come on other issues, and the minority vote will continue to, as what happened tonight with the school security cameras on it. So if it's the will of the school committee, fine, but I could just see, you know, you have a newly minted superintendent here, a vision, direction, want to go, and school committee, well, we don't care for that for whatever reason or not. And our attorney is now going to look to school your, that's just my opinion on it. So I'll, Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, looking at the scope of services, Mr. Roach, and what's your name again, ma'am?
Ms. Reardon.
Ms. Reardon, I just had a question. Is it uncommon to ask for a turnaround time when requests are submitted to this legal counsel? I guess my only concern is when we're utilizing an outside firm, if we need an answer ASAP on a matter that may be before the body, is there any language we can put in here that says, you know, we'll turn around, 24 business hours when a committee member reaches out on something? I think that's a fair expectation, because I think different firms have different expectations of, oh yeah, a client called, I'll get back to them in a week. And I think due to the nature of what we do here with this body, I think we need a quicker response time. And I think that should be outlined so that way they know what the expectation is from the onset. I don't know how that gets outlined, just a thought. I don't know if that's common when we do any contracting or scope of service.
That gets outlined if you pay the firm more money, because they're going to deal with their clients that are high-profile clients. And again, they're dealing with a number of different clients instead of someone who he or she is dedicated right here to the Springfield School Department, as Attorney Mindy Phelps was. So to get their attention, because again, this is not going to be their only client that they're going to have. So it's a good point you bring up. Say, geez, we need a turnaround within 24 hours. I'm sorry, I can't accommodate you on that. I'll let you explain.
We can absolutely put that language in there, and the expectation is we would take it back to the joint budget and finance and contract subcommittee to review any contracts for any additional language the committee.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think that's something, Vice Chair, that we would put into a contract saying a reasonable turnaround time to answer a question. That's a contractual thing that you would put in there. And tonight, I think, would be an example, Mayor, where, yes, you would have 2 attorneys in the room. Clearly, the in-house attorney would be answering questions on the policies in front of us, whether they align with current law. This attorney is supposed to be only addressing the rules the responsibilities that the law assigns to the school committee. That's what, they're supposed to be dealing with the school committee, its rights, its duties, its responsibilities, and answer questions on that. Where the in-house attorney has to make sure that the department is following DESI's regs, federal regs, state regs. They have two different roles. At least that's my perception of the way people are looking to have it go.
And we had that with Attorney Melinda Phelps. Okay, any other questions or comments? Obviously, there'll be a motion on the floor to, and does this have to be amended, by the way, as Dr. Deneau adeptly pointed out? It's scope of services here, not for position.
Yeah, I think Dr. Deneau was saying that the word position shouldn't have been there, to approve school committee legal counsel, not a position. The position tends to make you believe it's a person. You're hiring an employee.
Does it need to be amended, scope of services? Because this is going to be a firm, I would think. Now, this is perfect. We don't have an attorney here tonight to indicate that. Well, this is a position. It's not a position. This is going to be going out, subcontracting with hopefully a local firm to be on call. This indicates a position. That's why I wanted clarification. Was this for the school department attorney? No, this is for the school committee attorney. So it needs to be clarified here that it's scope of services for a contractual agreement. Hence my question about, this is really part-time, or it's on-call attorney. So I think you're probably going to have, for the record, some type of amendment on just the scope of service.
I would move that we strike the word position from item H, and that it read, approve school committee legal counsel.
And to Madam Clerk, does that have to be done anywhere throughout the narrative? Also,
Sorry?
Does that have to be done anywhere through the narrative?
I mean, I can amend it, for sure, in minutes.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor that delete position, scope of services by Mr. Collins. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Hurst. Roll call vote is required on amending it. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
And Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient vote, this matter passes. Thank you. Now on, any other questions or comments on the question?
So moved to,
Motion by Mr. Collins, or second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hurst. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
And Mayor Sarno?
No, more than sufficient vote, this matter passed. Thank you very much. I is to approve the executive confidential assistant to the school committee position. Madam Superintendent, Dr. Durham.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. A great deal of discussion and conversation has occurred in subcommittee pertaining to the executive confidential assistant to the school committee. Ms. Reardon is here to further discuss this opportunity for the school committee to secure their own confidential assistant. And I know that you can come to the mic. In Chief Valerie Williams' absence, we appreciate Christian Reardon for taking the time this evening to explain this item. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Interim Chief provided me with a job description. She indicated it was updated for subcommittee, and I believe on the seat.
I noticed in the thing, report to the vice chair.
Do you have the new copy? It says vice chair / superintendent.
And the superintendent, what about the chairman, he or she, of the school committee? Chairman is part of the school committee, correct?
Yes. So my understanding is that this copy was drafted, discussions as well as what occurred in subcommittee. So adjustments that were.
And does there have to be, as was spoken before, any synergy with the, in this case, Terry also? I mean, there's got to be some type of synergy going on.
Yes.
Or else you're going to make it untenable for the superintendent.
Yes, I would believe so.
Yes. Mr.
Okay. Yeah, so, but again, it says report to the vice chair. I'm the current chairman of the school committee, and I am part of the school committee.
Yes.
So I could not have any access to this individual?
I don't believe that to be the case because the copy that I have indicates it's vice chair / superintendent.
And the continuity, because vice chairs change at times. Vice chairmen change at times, he or she, and many times vice chairs will have separate careers or jobs. And so that's what I'm saying about the synergy. There has to be some type of overlapping type aspect with Terry and with the superintendent. Because again, I could see it. I hope it doesn't happen. Inherent conflicts occurring.
Understood.
Misinformation, miscommunication going on. So I'm just pointing these things out here. Vice Chair Gonzalez?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to note that this was a matter before the full body at our last meeting, and I didn't agree with tabling and sending it back to the subcommittee, but that was the prerogative of the majority, and the majority wanted to send it back to committee, so I did not attend when it was brought back to the subcommittee, although I did go back and watch. And I just want to note something to me that appears to be at odds with the intent of establishing this and also the legal counsel. Some of the words that were said by some of the last speakers noted this idea when you have one individual that may be answering to two different masters or answering two different bosses and how conflictual that is. So to be quite frank with all of my colleagues, I was shocked that after the push was, we need a separate secretary, we need a separate legal counsel, not for, when, not if, but when issues arise in the body. And then we come and we contradict ourselves and say, oh no, we're gonna put individuals back in the same type of predicament and we're gonna have them answer to the committee and also to the superintendent. When we've just noted that that was the same issue that we had when we had one legal counsel, when matters did, conflictual matters did arise. So to me, this is shocking. And to be quite frank, I would make a motion that we strike the word superintendent in this job description. If we are going to be honest and say that we're going to create an office that is going to support the job of the school committee, yes, they're going to work. I read the job description. They're going to work in collaboration with Dr. Denal and Ms. And whoever may be taking the position of executive assistant under you, Dr. Denal. But to me, this contradicts what we want to do. So it's like, if we're going to respectfully, I don't know any way else to say this, if we're going to be about something, then let's do it. We want to separate some powers and positions, then let's do that. But let's not go through all the work of moving money in a budget and then saying, oh, we're going to put a person in a conflictual role again, and they're going to report to two people.
Mr. Mayor?
I rest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Hurst.
So Vice Chairman Gonzalez, you're absolutely right. And I don't know if when you went back and watched the committee meeting, the subcommittee meeting, it wasn't with any malintentions, because I do agree that we need to have some real clear boundaries so that we don't find ourselves in the position that we were in just this past spring or summer. During that meeting, we talked about, what happens if that person needs to call in sick? What happens if, something happens and, we need them to communicate with Terry or to the superintendent. So we more so, if you look at the top, it says reports to school committee. We were just looking for a dotted line so that that person had somebody on a daily basis that if they needed to check in with, or they needed to sort of just, because the vice chairman does change, or the vice chair does change, or could change, and we aren't necessarily always available during the day at a minute's notice. So it wasn't, I understand how you can think that it might have been blurring of the lines. I just wanted to be able to express, and perhaps the others that were at the subcommittee meeting will chime in. It was more so, how do we just make sure that this person has somebody that that we know is going to be there that they can touch base with and that they can coordinate with, especially in the very beginning, because they're going to be brand new and there's going to need some level of cross supervision. And we also were thinking about capacity, right? Like personnel capacity, and that, like, if one day Ms. Montemayor wants to be on vacation, you know, can that person also help to fill in there? What about when that administrative assistant wants to take vacation or falls ill? You know, can somebody like Mrs. Montemayor fill in? So it was really more so about how do we have some level of collaboration and then somebody who can be available to that person. So it was not to necessarily blur lines, although I can see how that may appear. But it was really truly that the person reports to the school committee, but on a day-to-day basis, should they need to be able to check in, call somebody, we're not available, that they would have the superintendent there.
Mr. Mayor?
Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Hurst, for those comments. And I understood the intent when I rewatched the subcommittee meeting. I just think that the language says otherwise. So the language, for the public's knowledge, it says that this person reports directly to the Springfield School Committee and is under the supervision of the vice chair / superintendent. So I hear the intent argument, and I understood that. I rewatched it, but the language says otherwise. And I brought up in the last meeting when we went over this the importance of why it should be separated, because when, not if, but when conflict arises, that's a natural way of a body that does this deliberative process. It's important that if we have a conflict and we need to request something of the secretary, that they don't feel any sense of, oh my God, what do I do? Should I tell my boss? Because I have the way this reads, there's two bosses here. The way it says vice chair and the superintendent. So again, my motion stands. I move that we strike the word superintendent, and with respect to Dr. Denal and any future superintendent that may fill in the void in the institution in the decades to come, it's with no intent to create any dueling or anything like that. It's with the full intent to really separate, and so the person can be insulated and do their work. And I think collaboratively is already in there. It says the executive confidential assistant to the school committee is a collaborative and motivated individual. So I think naturally they're going to be collaborating with the executive assistant of the superintendent and with the superintendent's office. So again, I make a motion to strike the word superintendent under brief job.
On the motion, a comment. You rule on a letter of the law, whether it's the law, whether it's DESI, whether it's Title IX, et cetera. So, Superintendent.
First of all, Mr. Mayor, just a point of order. I did hear a motion. I did not hear a second to a motion to strike the word superintendent. So.
Is there a second? Hearing none.
Well, I will second it because I want us to be able to have discussion. Because I would like to hear what you all think, considering we did do this, and I don't think we had any.
Just trying to make sure that we're following the rules.
Motion.
So then, can I speak since I?
Yeah. Let me just clarify. Motion was made by Vice Chair Gonzalez, seconded by Ms. Hurst. I just want to finish up my statement, then I'll go to you, Mr. Collins. You rule on the letter of the law. You rule on the policies of the school department, school committee, and DESI, which has been done before. Dr. Denault gives out an edict. They're saying this is, we can't do this, we can do this. You can't do this. A school committee member or a few disagree with that and say, I want a different ruling on that. An inherent conflict's going to occur. And then when you say, again, we want some synergy, and Harry's not around or vice versa, and the superintendent says to the, if it is voted in, the confidential executive assistant to the school committee, to he or she, under law, we cannot do that under law. What position does that put her in at that point in time? If school committee members or some are pushing for something, even though whether I like the answer or not, the answer legally, you cannot do this. This is the way it has to be done. So, I mean, just like with the attorney's position, you are going to create an inherent conflict here, and the person that's going to be in the middle is sitting right there. So with that, I'll open it up. Mr. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, if I was the superintendent and that person came to me and say, is this a question of law, I would immediately pass it off to the attorneys rather than do the answer if I was sitting in her chair. But the reason this is worded as they report directly to the school committee and then the supervision is, I mean, the reality is this is a workplace. Neither the chair nor the vice chair are there every day. There are issues as far as lunchtime, as far as covering somebody going. There are just normal workplace duties that need to be answered where neither the chair nor the vice chair would be there to answer that in a timely manner. And every single week, there's going to be a matter of this person's schedule, because it's going to have to be a flexible schedule. Because on weeks where this person covers subcommittee meetings, they're not going to be coming in at the normal start time. It's going to be flexing all the time. Now, neither the chair nor the vice chair are there to understand all that nuance and has the ability or has all the information. They may have the ability, they don't have all the information in order to make those immediate decisions on, oh yeah, tomorrow I'll come in at 10 because you got subcommittee meeting here. And so I certainly would not support striking the word superintendent because we do need someone who's online there who can make those decisions, who can give the guidance in that. If a legal question comes up, they go to the attorney. That being said, that I won't talk too much about it because I don't want to confuse the issue. I will, assuming that if that does fail, I will be making a motion to add chair and vice chair. The HR department wrote this job description, and that's what we started working off, and that stayed in there. But clearly under state law, the chair of the committee is the one in charge of the committee. Under our rules, the vice chair works with the superintendent to set the agenda. So you probably need all three mentioned in there. Because under state law, with the school committees, it's the chair that has ex officio duties. But we've abrogated part of that duty, setting the agendas, to the vice chair. So you may need to have, unless the chairman wants us to amend that and he wants to get involved in setting the agendas, but I never heard that desire. So after this motion's dealt with, I'll be making one to put chair/vice chair/superintendent.
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chair.
I would just like to address the last speaker, and I want to be abundantly frank and clear again as we debate and deliberate on this policy, in this matter before us. If we're thinking about hiring anybody that needs to be babysat, and somebody to tell them, you take a lunch break? Okay, make sure you're back at this time. How many hours did you work this week? Oh, make sure you flex it this way. If we're hiring somebody that needs that level of supervision, don't hire them. We shouldn't hire them. This is a high-level position in a large organization that we're managing here, over $600 million, and we're saying that we're going to hire somebody that needs to be babysat. Respectfully, that's the way that I've heard it, and that's the way that I interpret that. Again, I'm going to stand on this. If we said, and I remember the intent of this meeting, it was all heated, that we wanted to separate money because we wanted to have separate legal counsel, we wanted to have a separate secretary, and then we come up with this iteration that, to me, to be quite frank, is just monstrous now. Hearing, now we're going to have three people, the chair, the vice chair, the superintendent. Let's be frank. Sometimes I don't agree with the chair. Sometimes I'm not going to agree with the superintendent. And guess who's going to be in the middle of all of that mess? The person that we're going to be hiring. I won't debate the matter anymore. This is the prerogative of the body. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor, may I say something? When we first brought this up, the reason why it was presented to us this way is because, Lord have mercy, I almost forgot her name, Ms. Valerie, Chief Williams, She went and did her research, her due diligence, her and her team, and they came back to us with what was referred to them through their research. We're going to the MASC, talking to them about best practices, wanting to understand what the interview process was going to look like, the hiring process would look like. So when they brought that to us, this was the language that she was directed to put in based on the research that she had. So this is not something that just came out of thin air or in any kind of way was malicious. It was really what was suggested based on what it is that we are seeking to do. Remember, when we bring in this individual, we have to be clear about who it is that they report to, what it is that they have to do, who it is that they have to be held accountable by. And for us to not have the superintendent mention, but expect them to be held accountable by somebody in the office was not fair. So that is why it was suggested by MASC to add the superintendent in there. If there's another way to frame the language that you would be amenable to, Vice Chair, then I can understand the supervision word, because that does give the delineation from the purpose of wanting to make sure that there is a clear understanding of who this individual reports to. However, I do think that it does make for a difficult work environment if somebody is in a space and nobody can hold them accountable that has to work with them on the day-to-day. So that is the growing concern that we have. We don't want somebody to be confused about what the expectations are of what they're supposed to do and how to carry out their position. And I know I'm not going to be in there telling anybody what to do or how to do it. And so unless that's something you're willing to do, Vice Chair, then we got to understand, and I know you know, working with people and having folks report to you, that there is not necessarily an expectation that the person is immature or unable to do their job, but there's still this level of wanting to understand what the expectations are in any work setting. And so who is going to be that person that sets the expectations on a daily basis, if not the superintendent who's in the office who will be working with them?
Thank you, Ms. Naylor. Any questions or comments?
Mayor,
First.
I guess my question is for Vice Chairman Gonzalez, the same question that Ms. Monroe-Naylor just stated. I don't want to see this not come to fruition, because we know that Ms. Montemayor needs some assistance, as well as the superintendent. So is there any language that you would be amenable to? Like, how could we particularly amend what's there so that it's clear that this person reports to the school committee, to the vice chair, but if needed, then the superintendent would be there? Or if not the superintendent, then, I don't know, is it the chairperson of another committee? Like, what could we do to make it work?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Vice Chair.
And I said I wasn't going to discuss it anymore, but
I was trying to get to you before you said.
I know, you asked a question of me. I'm going to be very frank. I think either the committee makes a decision this evening that we're going to create this separate office in its totality and to its fullness, or we just leave the 2 FTEs as they are and how they were for the past 3 years that I've sat in this body. Respectfully, I think that any iteration in between those two things is going to be a monster of a mess, because I've just heard one of the last speaker made a suggestion that they would make a motion to add a third entity to this job description, a third person to this job description. So again, those are my thoughts. Thank you, Ms. Hurst, for the question.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gonzalez. There was, there was a motion originally by Vice Chair Gonzalez to strike the superintendent, and that was seconded by Ms. Hurst. So on the, there's no other questions.
Strike the word.
Strike the word. Yeah, no, I know that. Not strike opposed. Not strike the superintendent. Strike the word. You could tell we needed some levity. As a matter of fact, Dave, are you sure you want to be on the school committee? So, we needed a little levity here. So, there's a motion on the floor made by Vice Chair Gonzalez to strike the word superintendent, seconded by Ms. Hurst. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
No.
Ms. Gresham?
No.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
No.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
And Mayor Sarno?
No, less than sufficient vote, this matter does not pass. Okay, on any other questions or comments pertaining to the, this item I? We had also, there was no, Mr. Collins, there was no other amendment on this, am I correct? That was the only other amendment on it.
Well, I mean, under statute and under Robert's Rules of Order, the chair basically is the one who makes all those calls. And like I said earlier, is we have a bit of a dichotomy here because the chair has delegated the authority to work on the agenda.
Yeah, always have, yeah.
With that and the superintendent. So, I mean, if I made a motion to strike the word vice out of there and said that the secretary of the school committee answers to the chair and the superintendent.
I don't want any part of it. I don't want any part of it. I have enough.
So you'd prefer to leave it alone?
No, I mean, I have enough, I got to deal with the city side, and that's 24/7, and again, I'm not supportive of this, so I don't want any part of it.
You're not supportive of the position, you mean, or?
I'm not going to vote in support of the position, but so I don't want to be put in there as that I have to supervise someone when I'm not even in the direct department. And that's why I think it's important that the superintendent has to play a role here. So, no, I'm not supportive of it, as I'm not supportive of bringing in the separate dueling attorneys or dueling secretaries. Not that, but there's got to be some type of synergy. And last thing I'll say, she gets put in the middle. That's not good for the system or our students stuff. So, thank you, Chris, on that, Mr. Collins. I won't accept that.
So the position, the point of this, the two positions that are in place right now only answer to the superintendent. There was no direct correlation to the, even though their titles, when you called there, it said secretary to the school committee, and they really didn't have anything that said they had to answer to the school committee. So if the school committee called and asked them to do something, you put that person in a position of having to go to the superintendent. And I think this was an attempt, whether you think you got there or not, to make sure that the school committee can call up their secretary and say, I'd like you to follow up on this, or I'd like you to pass, or whatever, any matter, that it shows this person that they do have responsibility to the school committee, because I think it was very ambiguous before.
But there's going to, I say, I think it's going to pass, obviously, but you got to keep the superintendent as part of this, because whether it's Terry or someone, he or she coming in, they're going to have school committee member or school committee says, geez, I'd like to get clarification on this issue, this policy, or I need this information. Who are you going to go to? You're not going to go to Ghostbusters. You're going to go to the superintendent, Dr. Donnell. At that point in time, whether she answers that question or has some vision or insight on it, she's going to delineate it, or she's going to down to one of her lieutenants. I mean, the assistant can't just make the thing up. Oh, but so I think either way, and again, I'm going to vote no overall on it, but you got to have I think what some of the school committee members agree, you got to have the superintendent's got to have some involvement in this.
Mayor, may I?
Yes, Attorney Murphy?
Well, I think we're trying to reach consensus here, and there may or may not be one, but I think that I tend to agree with a lot of what all of you have said. I just think this is the job description that was discussed in subcommittee. Yeah. It was sent back to subcommittee for this specific reason. Just about, it came out, I think it deserves a vote. I'd make a motion to approve the position as laid out in the job description.
Okay, so the other motion failed about the so this is on the original.
Just the way it is.
The way it is. Yeah.
Just the way it is.
Just the way it is.
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Attorney Murphy, seconded by.
I'm sorry, seconded.
Yeah.
Second, Peter.
Yeah, seconded by Ms. Hurst. A roll call vote is required.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
No.
And Mayor Sarno?
No, more than sufficient vote, the matter passes. Thank you very much. We'll now move to informational discussion items, reports of standing committees, student and parent concerns. Ms. Gresham, please.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Gresham. B, Buildings and Maintenance Committee, Mr. Collins.
Well, I hope people enjoyed, if they got a chance to go to see the new field.
Yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
I'm glad we're able to do that.
And I didn't hear the score. We had competing people there representing, they're sitting right next to each other who are rooting for two different teams.
I believe Putnam won.
Just rubbing it in, Mr. Collins. The mayor and I were rooting for Commerce. We'll get it next year.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. You diverted there, Chris. Legislative and Contracts Committee, Ms. Naylor.
All items have already gone before the school committee.
Thank you, Ms. Naylor.
You're welcome.
Curriculum Programs Committee, Ms. Hurst.
No report at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. E is Budget and Finance Committee, Mr.
I think we
Collins.
spent enough time discussing it.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Vocational Education Committee, Attorney Murphy.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Murphy. Technology Committee, Vice
No.
Chair Gonzalez.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. School Safety Committee, Ms. Gresham.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Gresham. Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Ms. Hurst, please.
Mr. Mayor, we are actually in the process of scheduling a meeting and having the Dyer team give us an update.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hurst. Now, and she's been very patient, put your hands together for our student representative, Ava Moore. From Putnam Vocational Technical Academy. For those who might have tuned in after the fact, she's a senior, and she's looking to go into criminal justice. She's senior class president, representative of Student Advisory Council. She's also a member of the Centro Cristiano Nacion de Jesus Church, that's on Sumner Avenue, CCNJ, where she volunteers in youth ministry. She works with media ministry, actively helps with the children's ministry. And what I love is that with the criminal justice, and then we have Detective Greg McCain, who's our officer tonight. She wants to get on the Springfield Police Department and become a detective. We think that's fantastic because she wants to give back to her community, our community of Springfield. Ava, the floor is yours.
Mr. Mayor. I want to mention first, Putnam won 36 to
Yeah.
6.
Yeah, and we love Putnam too, George. I mean, we're Commerce Red Rated alumni, yeah.
Okay. So, hi, good evening. My name is Ava Moore. I am a 17-year-old senior at Putnam High School. I live not too far from here in the north end of Springfield. Recently, the Student Advisory Board met with Chief Jose, along with a few students and their advisors for the said advisory board. We discussed in depth the responsibilities and duties that we will have over this upcoming school year. We discussed a few issues that we have seen within our own schools and community, along with possible solutions for said issues. The SSAC is a group of students elected by their peers from schools throughout Massachusetts who are helping making decisions about state education policies and student rights. These students are initiating and carrying through projects to make changes in local schools, and students want to have say in the decisions made about their education. America's democracy system is rooted in the beliefs that all citizens who are affected by the system have a voice. The SSAC communicates students' views to those who make decisions about education. Schools need students with leadership skills, and the SSAC gives students leadership training and experience to fill this intellectual. A few events occurring within the next few months at Putnam High School for the seniors of 2025 release are the MCAC, which is the Massachusetts College Application Celebration, and the student rep visits. The Massachusetts College Application Celebration, or otherwise known as MCAC, is a week-long event bringing in selected colleges and universities, both in and out of state, giving our graduating seniors the opportunity to complete the college applications with possible on-the-spot acceptances, scholarships, and fee waivers for said applications. Every single student in and out of the city deserves the opportunity to meet with a rep, go over their post-secondary education options, despite their financial differences and home life situations. Bringing resources to the students has shown at Putnam to be more effective with student engagement rather than simply telling them and expecting them to show up. I have been working closely with our counselors and advisors with planning events for our students throughout the whole school, not only just the senior class, but within the next few months, we are hoping to have a few educational relating to the FAFSA process and the after high school process as well, and fun for the student engagement. Who doesn't love a little fun? Thank you.
Nice job, Ms. Moore. You're a voting member now. Who's in the crowd for you there? I noticed Mom is being. Oh, thank you, Mom. And little sis, what's your name, little sis? What is it? Mia. Okay, your sister did a good job, huh? Yeah, very good. Well, we're glad to have you on board. If any school committee members have any questions or comments for Ms. Moore? Thank you. Well, very well prepared.
Help you need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Mia, pretty good, huh? What position you play? What? Say that again? Oh, I was a crazy goalie in high school and college, so you would have been shooting the ball at me, right? You got to run like the wind. Continued success on and off the field. Ava, that was a great job. Thank you very much. We'll now go to the report of the superintendent. Madam Superintendent, Dr. Denal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. It is my desire to one day be able to say that I am not going to keep it brief, but tonight, again, I will keep it brief. So, Ava, we're very proud of you. Welcome aboard. Thank you so much for your eloquence and poise. We look forward to hearing great things from you in the future. I had the honor of visiting our pre-K sites on the first day of school. We went to all 4 of those sites, and we had an amazing time looking into the faces of our hopeful and exciting and wonderful students. The 3- and 4-year-olds were amazing. They were so brave and just marched into that school independently, and there were a few folks who had some tears. I think some parents had more tears than the students, but we were quick to accommodate every student who was feeling a little bit of separation anxiety, and we were able to acclimate them to their new learning environment rather quickly. And I was told I was told that by the end of the day, there's still tears, but because they don't want to leave and go home. They're crying because they want to stay in school, because the leaders and the educators and the individuals in those buildings have created a warm and welcoming and nurturing environment. So our students are really enjoying themselves and loving every minute of their learning experience in our universal pre-K program. Plumfield is a beautiful facility. I had the honor and privilege of being there on Friday during the ribbon cutting. It is a state-of-the-art, second to none, top-notch facility. And I was saying to someone just today, so often we see rundown areas in urban cities and urban opportunities for our students. The lights aren't on in the night, and the basketball field is full of weeds, and the football field is not high-quality turf. That is not the case. Our students were well worth the millions of dollars, and those millions of dollars were spent because our mayor and those who made the decision to build the field truly believe that our students deserve the best. So I applaud those who We were able to complete 18 observations in 2 days. We're having a wonderful time going through the buildings with our principals, who are the instructional leaders of the building, to ensure that we are looking at our educators to move them from good to great. We know that when we move teachers, we move students. When teachers are great, students are great, and academic success is inevitable. So our principals and our educators, I applaud them and thank each one of them for opening up their buildings and their classrooms. We have an amazing plan in place. We're being very strategic and intentional as we look at the high quality instructional material being implemented throughout our schools, knowing that our students are the ones who will be the recipients of high quality instruction. I did want to follow up on a couple of items that Vice Chair Gonzalez brought to our attention during last week's new business, and I want to ensure that we do listen to the concerns, and we are ready, willing, and able to address those concerns. So I'm going to ask Roberto Ortiz to come to the mic at this time, as well as Pat Roach and Jose Escribano, so they can come forward and follow up on the two items. One item is to discuss the vacancies, as well as the second item to make sure that we cover the concerns that arose from SAS. Mr. Ortiz, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Mr. Ortiz.
So at the beginning of the year, we reported 107 teacher vacancies. As of September 9th, we have 91 vacancies. So we have filled a total of 16 vacancies in the past 4 weeks. At the beginning of the year, we reported 27 paraeducators vacancies. Now we're still at 23. But the good news is that we had about 15 new applicants this week, and we're looking to place us within the next week or so. So I'm excited about that. For ZEP, we had 75 vacancies at the beginning of the year, and we still at 74 teacher vacancies for the empowerment zone. For paraeducators, we had 24 reported at the beginning of the year. Now we're still sitting at 21 vacancies.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. and
Thank you.
Dr. Donnell. Follow up.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor? May I?
Ms. Hirsch?
Thank you, Dr. Denal. This is great that you all came in. Do we handle the ZEP hiring, or do they handle their own hiring?
They do all of the interviews, the postings, and all things of that nature. We do the paperwork and the queries and the background checks, yes. And to just contextualize some of those vacancies, there are a number of resignations during the first week of PD, as well as the fact that we do have some vacancies. However, all of our students have a trained adult in front of them. There are some paraprofessionals, highly skilled, highly trained, who are now the teacher of record. So every single day, all of our classrooms have a trained adult in front of them, providing instruction, getting extra support. What we do have to do is still count those as vacancies. But please don't think that that reflects the fact that there are not trained adults in front of our students.
And if I can add, Dr. Donnell,
Ortiz,
we're tapping into those paraeducators to get into the paraeducator teacher pipeline. So get them into the undergrad programs and, hopefully support them getting certified. So we're doing a lot of that work.
Thank you.
And also those vacancies include the newly created programs, the newly created positions, which increases that number too.
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Ortiz? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Ortiz.
And he has been very instrumental. Thank you, Mr. Ortiz, for being so instrumental in helping to close that vacancy gap. Thank you.
Sure.
I love the collaboration on my team. I was told that I have the best team in the district, or excuse me, I have the best employees in the city, and they have proven to be just that. The collaboration between Chief Escribano and Chief Roach to address the very serious concerns coming out of SAS. Their collaboration was immediate, it was thorough, on point, and not only did they address the immediate need, they also have a plan going forward to ensure that this no longer becomes an issue. Go ahead, please.
Yes, after the last school committee meeting, followed up with student assignment services. There was a little bit of a backlog there, kind of similar to prior years, but we made some changes. We were able to there was a lot of backlog related to immunization paperwork, and we worked with Nurse Clancy to make sure that we got those students into school right away. There was a backlog with the McKinney-Vento, and we made some changes that we thought would make a big difference. And we're also working on some things that'll do some automations and speed things up going forward for next year, and we're working on that now.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Mr. Escribano?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that we followed up with every parent, made sure every concern was addressed. We followed up this week, make sure that registration happened. And just to add some context, we were dealing with an increase of migrant population, which made it difficult for enrollment the process because of paperwork, whether lacking a lot of paperwork. And so what we did was we made sure we streamlined the process, we addressed all those issues, and we've got it down to, I think, single digits with that population within a week. So And those numbers are just those that came in this week. So it would have essentially been 0, but we had some come in this week, so.
Thank you, Mr. Escobar. And thank you, Dr. Deneau, because my office did get some calls and emails, which we had sent over for clarification and review and follow-up. And, you know, obviously, there's always two sides of the story, but you've knocked that number down tremendously. And there's always a huge influx very, very late. And we have a very transitional population at times, too. So thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions or comments.
I do,
Mr.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Escobar. Ms. Naylor, please.
My question is regarding the calls. There were concerns from several constituents that they were calling and they were not getting anyone to pick up the phone. And have we figured out why that was happening? Was there an issue with the phone system, or what is going on with that?
There was not an issue with the phone system. It was a backlog of staff, and we've addressed it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Roach or Mr. Escobar? Okay, hearing none, we'll go back to Madam Superintendent, Dr. Deneau. Dr. Deneau, any questions or comments of the Superintendent?
Just one comment, Mr. Mayor.
Collins.
On page 4 of that appointment, that is not me.
I know I absolutely right. And it's not you. I won't even joke that you're related. I won't even joke.
Not even related.
You're two totally different people.
And I get his emails
all the time.
Twice a day.
You must. He is the scheduling guru for the Springfield Empowerment Zone.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Living that double.
Thank you.
That was hilarious
Thank you.
when I saw that.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. If there's no other questions or comments pertaining to the superintendent's report, unfinished business, please. New business.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I do have a couple of things I want to bring up. The first is that we talked about, and I don't know if this is unfinished business, but we did talk about the safety concerns.
Under new business.
Would that be considered under new business, or? Okay, I'll wait for new business.
Fine.
I'll wait.
Well, yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
One
So,
category we have to go through.
yes, sir. So, Safety Subcommittee, I wanted to ask if Mrs. Gresham would consider being able to have a meeting to discuss what some of those measures are that we could look at, similar to some of those things that Mrs. Hurst brought up that I think are really good ideas that other folks are doing around the country, to see if there are other ways that we can continue to elevate how we protect our families and our staff in our schools.
Thank you, Mr. And I would ask, too, if you could maybe double it up there and do the
joint, yeah.
the MOU, just to...
Absolutely.
Great, that's fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to suggest that be a joint subcommittee meeting
With
between
you.
us.
Yeah, you.
With myself and Mrs. Gresham.
Beautiful, thank you very much.
And then, Mr. Mayor, I have two more items. The school uniform policy has been something that has been brought up to me several times by students and families. I wanted to see if we can bring that up in a future meeting. I do not know whose subcommittee it will go under, but for us to review it, there's been some concerns by folks of its level of equity, whether or not it's an equitable policy. And I know that we've looked at a lot of policies over the last year, but I don't recall that being one of them that was brought up by Attorney Phelps as something that was looked at. So I wanted to bring that up. And then also the transportation policy. I didn't know whose department that fell under, but I know there are some questions that Vice Chair Gonzalez had about the transportation policy, but I also do as well.
That, the budget and finance, that probably could fall under transportation.
Yes, I had some questions that I brought up in the subcommittee meeting, and I think we need to discuss, and I'm not sure, we weren't quite sure when we were in that subcommittee meeting which questions I had fell under what. And so I think it's a matter of kind of understanding where it lies so that we can have those conversations in those settings.
Yeah, Mr. Roach would be an integral part of that. I mean, I pay for it on the city side, but Vice Chair Gonzalez?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to offer up to the first item that Ms. Naylor brought up. I would just offer a friendly suggestion that the community input session not happen in our boardroom, so that way it's more easily accessible for the community, so we could pick one of the schools in the city to do that at. The other piece on the transportation side of it, I would like to review this, Ms. Naylor. I think that's a policy under your subcommittee and
Of contracts, yeah.
to come forward to the full body, but I think this needs to be reviewed. And the reason why it needs to be reviewed, I think we have to figure out some creative ways in which we can empower the bureaucracy to make decisions on a case-by-case basis, that currently it's so stringent that they can't make certain decisions that are pragmatic in nature. And that's a really good example of when government is really tying the hands of the people that are supposed to be serving our constituency. So I just want to explore that more at length, and I'll have more detail to share when and if we can schedule that.
Could I just add to, Ms. Naylor, on your addition, if he's available, and he's been very good being on the committee, Police Superintendent Larry Akers coming to that, the meeting, again, being able to fortify, say, this is what it is here again, and I think that would go a long way also. And I think he'd be open to that if his schedule permits. I think he likes engaging with the community. And maybe that could shed some light saying, okay, we got it now, and then we can bring the thing back, and so that'd be great. Yes, if you're done, Ms. Naylor?
Yes, I am.
Ms. Hurst?
I just want to have a better understanding about the transportation piece. Is it about the cost, or is it something else? And the only reason that I ask that is because I too have received calls about transportation, and it's more so been about the policy in place around the 2 miles. Is that what you all are referring to?
Yes, that is my concern. We have had some folks come forth with some really substantial concerns.
Right.
And we talked about this about a year ago in subcommittee, and we were supposed to revisit it, and we never did. So it's time for us to really kind of sink our teeth into it and kind of figure out how do we properly address the concerns of our constituents.
So would it go through parent concerns or, and I also think we should really rethink that title, parent concern, but community concerns?
Yeah, you'd have student and parents with the, on that, and also I think with the uniforms would go through Ms. Gresham committee. If it's not contractual, yeah, then we pay for it on the city side. So this is about policy then.
Mr. Chairman?
If Ms. Hurst is done?
I'm done. I
Yeah.
just find clarity.
Vice Chair Gonzalez?
What the issue
So I think Barbara hits the trifecta here. She's involved in all three.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. I said I'd hold it back, but you asked the question in terms of the specificity around it. And to be completely open and honest with the body, I had a constituent concern around the distance from the walk from the home to the school, in which there was a bus stop, this is according to the constituent, there was a bus stop available that was a shorter walk, and again, according to the constituent's knowledge, had vacancy going to the same school. So that's just an example where we've got to change this policy that somebody at the central office, transportation department, you just make a good judgment call at that, but the policy doesn't allow for that. I mean, if there's a school bus the bus stop is a shorter distance than walking the near close 2 miles, to me, that's just a common sense decision. Let's put the kid on the bus. It's vacant. Instead of walking the near 2 miles, if they're right at that buffer space, they're going to walk now a half a mile or 1 mile to go to the same school. It's not going to cost us anymore with the concern cost, Mr. Mayor, as this comes on your side. So again, I think there's situations that have come up during the years where there's things and solutions that make sense, and I understand the predicament that the bureaucracy is in from making those decisions due to policy, and that's what I want to explore.
Through the superintendent, Madam Superintendent, Mr. Roach, Pat? Mr. Roach, if you want, or we can wait till subcommittee, if you just want to chime in just quickly, or we can wait till the subcommittee meeting on it. They're talking about, if it's so, a lot of times we don't get both sides of the story. If it's so, say that was a circumstance where there is a bus literally going by the kid walking to school.
We stick with a hard and fast rule of the school committee policy. So the school committee policy doesn't allow for exemptions, so we don't offer any exemptions. We hard and fast to the policy.
So we'd have to carve something. If we did, we have to carve something on extenuating circumstances. Let's say if this is so. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roach. Any Any other questions or comments pertaining to no business? Hearing none, is there a motion on the floor to adjourn?
So moved.
Ms. Hurst, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Naylor. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Monroe-Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
No, I think we should continue to.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy is absent. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient vote, this matter passes. Good evening, and thank you for watching. Good health and God bless. Bye. See, we can